Well, good morning. We meet again. Again, I'm Andrew, and it's Friday now, so 2 days after my last little post here, and I felt it was important to say more. I was going to say something yesterday, but life got a hold of me and got me caught up in it. But struck me that the first thing I really wanted to talk about was spirituality, because I think that in any healing journey, mine being the one I can talk about right now, is spirituality. It's the first step, and it occurred to me that there's so much in the world of spirituality that you can approach and you can digest and you can be guided from, and I can say that in my journey, being immersed in a spiritual journey has been the defining feature of my life. But what I would say is that the most important thing, more important than anything else, is being loving. And that maybe sounds trite or I don't know, obvious, but it's subtle, because when I was younger, for example, my healing journey, if I really think about it in its total scope, it began when I was in my late teens, because my early childhood had a lot of traumas in it. Being in my home context, there are lots of things I could talk about, but essentially, the kind of notes that were put inside of me by my interactions in my home life were shame, humiliation, guilt, wrongness, being wrong, not belonging, having no worth, having no value. I feel embarrassed even saying these things out loud because it sounds like a pity party, And yet, if you don't acknowledge your hurt, you can't really get to the secret inner core of yourself. You can't do it. The hurt that you can't acknowledge becomes like a shell, becomes in between you and your true being. And so that definitely happened to me. And so all the bad habits were like ingrained in me at an early age. And then my mom died when I was 14. And that was like the seal on the crypt, because all those feelings, death crisis is a human experience. We're all going to die. We all have to face that. And as we get older in life, people start dying, and how we respond to death is pretty interesting. It's as variable as there are people, and there's healthy ways and unhealthy ways of dealing with it. And I dealt with my death crisis unhealthily. And what I mean by that is I had no support. I didn't talk to anyone about it. No one talked to me about it. I was a kid at the time, so it would have been nice if someone had tried to help me, but no one did. And what that did is pretty much galvanize all that unhealthiness, so that my feelings of loss, my feelings of grief, my feelings of uncertainty and fear, and just that dark shroud that comes on you when you really first taste mortality. And without anyone there to help me, it just basically put me into this false state of pretending things were okay. And that became my mode of living, pretending things were okay, and never addressing those deep places of hurt, those deep places of genuine questioning, those deep places of just human interaction that I wasn't receiving and I needed and didn't have. And I suppose at this point, the reason why this is important for me to say, of course, I'm dealing with my healing journey here. I'm sharing it with you because healing is important in life. And yet, when I talk about my own work in the field, and I talked about the trans-theoretical model of change, right? That first place is pre-contemplation, right? We're all born into pre-contemplation. You may argue, well, some people are, the reincarnation of yogis or the reincarnation of some kind of spiritual being, and it's like all of that. I don't know about that, but I certainly have not met anyone who is not cultivated into pre-contemplation, which is to say you don't ask questions, I mean, I had questions when I was young, and yet my parents couldn't answer them. I'm an emotional person. I got a lot of energy, and I've got a pretty active mind and an active imagination. And I had a lot of questions when I was little, and not only did no one answer my questions, I was kind of brutalized for asking them, and made to feel that there's something wrong with me, and so that my spirit of inquiry, my spirit itself was blunted and damaged by that continual hammering rather than an encouragement and a flourishing. It was this hammering and this negativeness, And then when something really bad did happen, which is to say when my mom died in 1985, all the bad patterns sealed me in and disconnected me from my life, from my truth, from my love, from everything that's valuable inside me. And I had no idea. Sealed in. I just thought, well, that's what it is. I'll just pretend that everything's okay and carry on. And that's how I went through high school. I gained a lot of weight. I was really, really fat, fat. I became a bully. I projected all that darkness onto other people and attacked it in them. Just a bad time. And, that's the topic. Those details, I'm well ready to share them. But in this particular moment, I'm just going to put them out there. It's like, well, that's what happened to me, And then a friend of mine actually was the first person to intervene and said, oh, you're really hurting this person. Because, I was nasty in those days. And so I ended up hurting this person. And we had a mutual friend, and he's my good friend. He's been my friend my whole life. He's still my friend. And he pointed out that I was doing some real harm to someone. And it's like it woke me up. It jarred me. Like, whoa, what am I doing? Whenever I receive information, I'm very, it changes me instantly. And so, in that moment, I apologized to that person, and we resolved that moment, and then it was over. You know what I mean? But for me, that was the beginning of what's wrong with me? Again, what's wrong with me? This questioning opened up again. What's wrong with me? I became a seeker in that point when I realized I was harming someone, and that's not who I am. So there's this confusion of that's not who I am, but what am I doing these things for? What's happening, right? So we could say that was the beginning of my contemplation phase, where I was like, what's wrong? What's wrong with me? What's going on, And so years went on, and the first thing I managed to do is I managed to lose the weight. So on my own, I managed to learn how to control my appetite. I learned how to fast. I lost 100 pounds in 1988 to 1989. So as I just coming out of high school, I lost that weight. It's a topic of another moment like this maybe, but just to say that happened. And then as I lost the weight, I became kind of a different person. Different, but only to a certain depth. I could say that in those days, my contemplation created a kind of partial insight. In the field, when we talk about mental health and addictions, we can say that people have, when you talk about insight, does they have insight into their illness? Do they have insight into their addiction? Oftentimes you get this partial insight. And that's where someone's contemplative. They're not willing to change. They're not ready to change. They don't see that change process. But because they've got that partial insight, they're like, I know a few things, but not enough to change. And that's definitely where I was. I'd moved from pre-contemplation to contemplation, thinking about it. And I was interested, always been a seeker. That part of me which was always asking questions was activated again. And because I was an adult now, technically, age of 18, 19, and I'd lost this weight, I'd become a different person to some extent, right? Life changed for me. And then the thing that really launched me onto my healing journey, as I understand it today, was 1991. My birthday, which is in November 1991. A friend of mine, I don't know if he's a friend of mine anymore. We sometimes contact each other. I feel friendship towards him, but I don't know what he feels because he's got issues of addiction. It's everywhere in life. It's just everywhere these days. But at that time, he gave me Journey to Ixtlan on my birthday in 1991, and that was the beginning, because Carlos Castaneda was the first person whose voice reached me inside. And such as I was, it reached me in my place of partial insight. And so the first thing that set me on my way was the idea of your last battlefield, which is to say, do your best in the moment. Why? Why do my best? Because prior to that, I'd been this real lazy, indolent, resistant, just miserable and unable to just be interested in anything or to get involved in anything. What's the point? What's the point of doing anything? Who cares? Just disconnected from life, disconnected from myself. You know what I mean? Just wallowing in dark feelings and not having any idea about it really, and feeling miserable about myself and all those kind of things, and yet masked, pretending everything is okay as well. So anyway, suddenly here's a writer saying, you just try in the moment. Do your best in the moment. Why? Because it feels good. Just do your best. Don't leave anything to chance. Just do your best. Do everything you can to get the most out of this moment, to do your best in the moment. That was the first piece of knowledge that reached me. I was like, I'm going to try that because maybe that's something, right? And I can definitely tell you that doing your best in every moment, regardless of what's coming at you, is a huge piece in learning and healing and living a full life. The problem for me is that it was built on a loveless basis, and I think that's why I was inclined in my last post to talk about devotion and devotional living, which is to say being in love with your life, because that's more important than anything else in life, is to be in love with life. But it includes you. It's got to start with you. If you find that you can love other people, but you can't love yourself, there's healing to be done right there. My rule of thumb is be loving. Be loving at all times. Feel that love. Love is like a flow. Love is a flow state. It unlocks things. It loosens things. It gives you a fluidity. It gives you an emotional and a physical mobility. If you're in a state of being loving, it's a process. It's an ongoing process. If something is in the way, if you say, no, I can't feel that, or no, I can't do this, I can't do that, whatever's going on in there, whatever thoughts are blocking you from feeling love right now, feeling love for yourself, that's where healing begins. That's where healing begins. Why can't I love myself? Because I'm this, because I'm that, because someone said this, or because I did that. These are just places that you discover. Love shows you what you need to heal inside yourself. And that could be past experiences, things people have done to you, things you have done, whatever it might be. That's the substance of healing. And in my own feeling, as I've learned over the years, there's loving, and if something is the way of loving, you're instantly healing. These are like gears. These are my gears of being, be loving. I'm loving every moment. And if there's something in the way, what is that? I draw my attention to it. I don't get caught up in judgment or thinking too much about it. I observe. I hate to use that language because it sounds very cliche. Observe the thinking, observe what you're feeling, and yet it's true. It's goddamn true. You have to do it. It's not trite. It's not obvious. It's the essential beginning point. Be loving. Love yourself. And that love is an energy which just flows out of you. If you can love yourself, you become a wellspring of loving for others. And it's important. It's the only thing that matters, because you're the one who's got to live your life. You're the one who's going to face your own death. Be loving. It's the only way to be. And if there's something in the way, be healing. Be healing. Okay, well, if I feel like I'm a piece of shit, it's clearly something I got to work on. Let's work on it. Be healing. Heal it. Heal it. And what does that look like? Well, again, Carlos Castaneda's got a phrase for that. It's called recapitulation. You don't just think about the past. You relive it. You relive what you did. You relive what was done to you. You unhinge yourself from those things that stuck you there. And I use that phrase a lot these days, stickiness. History is sticky. The past is sticky. Things that affect us and hurt us and hold us inside and keep us from loving ourselves freely and being in love with the world. It's sticky. It sticks us in there. And what sticks us is this connection to our thinking. You know what I mean? We think the world is as we think it is. We're trapped in there. It sticks us in there, and we cannot loosen up and get into the flow, of being loving. Anyway, loving, healing, these two gears of life. There's more gears than that. I'm just going to leave it at that for now, because being on a healing journey, I want to focus. I want to focus on healing and loving, right? So the reason I want to say that is because when I talk about spirituality, in the last one I mentioned stillness. Come into stillness inside. Stillness is what allows the space for true being. What is true being? Being is just being here, just being alive, your aliveness. Once you feel your aliveness, I don't know, for some reason, that becomes a kind of love feeling to me. If I'm still, if I stop thinking about it, if I stop worrying and judging and whatever it might be happening inside of me, I find that like the space between the thoughts, the space between the words, the space between the process that I'm stuck in, if I can just stop getting stuck in it, I don't know, love opens up inside me, and it begins to be like, a serpent chasing its tail. Stillness, loving. Well, you get still and then you can feel love. But if you got to feel love in order to open up stillness, I don't know. It's a question of being in the moment, and becoming still inside is the principle of Carlos Castaneda's works, for example. And it's the principle of yoga. It's the principle of, I think, if you really pay attention to spiritual teachings, you have to be able to stop your thinking. You got to stop the process, right? Carlos talks about stopping the world. Remember last time I talked about getting arrested. Arrested was the key thing in my life. And I used Joyce as an example to talk about the word arrest, being stopped. Stopped. What then? Right? Well, that is the essence of a spiritual journey, is once you've stopped, what then? Well, if you can just take a deep breath and not get stuck into what you're thinking or history or whatever else might be going on in the external world, you find this place inside yourself, being. And I find personally that being fills me with a kind of loving energy, releases me from being caught up in draining myself in all of these toxic processes, inside the head, outside in the world, whatever may be happening. It's like I unhinge from those a little bit and hinge myself into some different aspect, which energizes me. And energy is loving. Try it for yourself, Try it for yourself. Just take a few breaths and just feel your life. Feel it. What does it feel like? You know what I mean? It's not thinking, because if you start thinking, you get caught up in the past, pulls you back into that sticky substance from which you just get gummed up. And that stickiness then sticks to the outside world, because whatever the world is, it materializes in the direction of our own thoughts and emphasis, So what are you emphasizing, Are you emphasizing these thoughts which picture you as a bad person or an unworthy person or a wrong person or a piece of shit or whatever it might be? Well, in that case, you're going to be stuck there. And when you engage the world is going to come to you through that filter as well. It is just a deadly, vicious circle. And the solution is, loving. And if there's something in the way of loving, work it out. Carlos Castaneda talks about recapitulation, And recapitulation is a process that happens that helps you stop the world, stop the momentum. What momentum? Well, the negative momentum, the momentum of our conditioning, whatever it might be, It's powerful stuff. And the reason I emphasize loving is because 1991, that's a long time ago. And it was 2018 that I finally stopped the world, I can tell you at certain times in my life, through the use of psychedelics and also through incredible hardships now, that I experienced, I did get the chance to stop the world. I've been stopped a bunch of times. Stop the world. What then? All I did was re-engage in my negative thinking process. I never was able to love myself. I loved other people, and I lived in this world of dislocation from myself. I use the word dislocated a lot to talk about, when I was really, really unhealthy inside myself, because it felt like dislocation. You ever dislocated your shoulder or a finger or a joint? It's like, it is pain, it is immobility, it is just unworkable, an unworkable situation. Pain is the center element, but also you're useless. You can't do anything, right? And, traumas dislocate us from what's inside of ourselves. And by traumas, there's as Dr. Mattei says in his latest book, Myth of the Normal, there's big T traumas. So for me, in my case, that death trauma at the age of 14 was a big T trauma. Like, whoa, like shit is real, right? But then there's the little T traumas. That's the way, my upbringing was very harmful to me. My parents never intended to harm me. I know they didn't mean to. Maybe sometimes my dad did a little bit, but mostly it was unintentional. It was just the abrasion of different ways of living, closed ways of living versus an open way of living, and how we get abrased by life. And trauma is not so much what happens to us, because if you concern yourself with what goes on, what's happening to you, you get into a comparison game. Well, people have gone through much worse than I've gone on, so I should just suck it up because I'm just fine, right? You cannot compare. Your own pain is something that you create. And let me turn it back on myself. My pain was something that I created as a child. I had no other recourse, because as a child, you trust the people around you to be the world that you're living in, and it's a trust that's not conscious. It's pre-conscious, when you're a child, you just take in the world, and your parents are the world that you live in. And so, that's where the traumas come from, right? And a protective measure is not to blame them because you're incapable of blaming them. You blame yourself. Well, something's got to be wrong with me if I'm discordant with the environment, So the conditioning becomes this separation, this disconnection, right? And then if something really bad happens, like a big T trauma, those little T traumas, which will create illness in you eventually, right? Bam! Dislocation. That death dislocated me from myself deeply and forced me. I say force, that makes me seem I don't have any choice. I didn't talk to anyone about it. I never vocalized. I never engaged with it. I never was able to talk about my own hurt. You know what I mean? And so as a result, it just sunk down. I pretended things were okay, and I was just in this state of dislocation, a state of pain, a state of immobility, a state of incapacity, covered up by this ridiculous idea that there was nothing wrong with me. And of course, when you get into a place like that, you're disconnected from your own heart space. And so you got less empathy for other people in their heart space, And then, as I said, when I was in high school, terrible bully, terrible, you know what I mean? However, when the information was made clear to me, I was like, I don't want that. I am not that. Boom. I never did that again. But after that, I struggled continually with this inability to connect with my life, which was an inability to connect with myself. And the thing is, it didn't mean I didn't love other people. It didn't mean I didn't love. I loved other people. I didn't love myself. So it was this disconnection, and then I could never properly be present in all of my relationships, So again, let me bring it back into spirituality, right? Like, what is it to be spiritual? To be spiritual is to come to that still place inside. And when you get still and you begin to be, I don't know, loving happens. You know what I mean? That's the point where techniques are helpful. Like if I had managed to reach a loving place inside myself in 1991, say, and by the way, in that work, Journey to Ixtlan, he does say find a path with heart. You got to be loved. You got to find your love, right? Not somehow, because of my own dislocation, I just disregarded the love part. Like, I don't need love because, there's nothing wrong with me, right? But the principles of warriorhood that he puts out there, that did resonate in me. And through experimentation in my own life, I discovered incredible capacities. Like I was able to do amazing things, like I did have a lot of value. I did have a lot of quality, but it was always based on this essential disconnection. So my insight was always partial. So here I was trying to be a warrior, living like a warrior, doing my best in every moment, recapitulating things that happened in the past, and yet I could never get down to that basic element because I was never coming from that clear flow of being, that clear flow of loving, And, the world did get stopped in me a few times, you know what I mean? And yet every time it stopped, what then, right? I just reverted back to the historical process, partial insight. As I got older in life, I just got more and more despairing, more and more desperate. And in the end of the day, I got involved in shitty business and shitty, terrible things that I didn't even realize. I didn't see it because all I saw was, well, this is nowhere near as bad as I am inside. And so I ended up creating a shame path through feeling ashamed of myself. I mean, that's the craziness. It's like world manifests in terms of the way you fixate and the way that you emphasize, right? So getting arrested at last and suddenly being ashamed of myself, like, what? I'm arrested. What the fuck is this, right? It was like, after all, the person I was to begin with was never wrong. There's nothing wrong with me. My questions were always valid. I've always been a loving being. It was the conditioning that dislocated me from it. And so being arrested just popped me right back in there. I can't explain it to you except to say I'm grateful for it. Because, what I've been saying, I say to my friends, in 2018, God came into my life in the form of the American Department of Justice. And I mean that. And I'm laughing about it because all I can do is laugh. But it's not a bitter laughter the way I used to laugh when I was younger. It's a delight laugh now because it doesn't matter when you wake up in life. You just got to wake up. The moment you wake up, everything that happened to you until that point is just a prelude to being alive now. And that's the essence of it. It's the essence of being spiritual, being alive now. Whatever's in the way of that, that's your healing journey. That's my healing journey. I think that's what I got to say about it today. I felt it was important to say because without love, all the techniques are good and they will eventually get you there. But without loving, it's all empty. It's all futile. And it just leads you in the empty, arid places that you already know so well. How to break free. How to break free. I needed an outside influence. And by outside, it's like, I understand that like I got involved in some bad stuff and this intervention happened for me. But the way that I was opened up, the touch that I received was something that I can't put into words because it should have been the worst day of my life. And yet it was the best day of my life. Because from there, I have been more alive than ever in my life. I've had energy. I've felt love. I've created love. I've been in loving relationships. That doesn't mean life's been easy. It means that I have been different inside of it. And that's the essence of a healing journey. That's the essence of change, to go from pre-contemplation where you don't know what the fuck's going on and you don't care, right? Not because you're an asshole, but just because some shit has happened and you haven't thought about things, right? And you're thinking about it, right? I was in contemplation for decades. I'm telling this to you because you don't need that. You don't need to spend all those years, You got to find that love inside first. Be devoted. Fall in love with your life. Begins by loving yourself. If you can't love yourself, if you can't relax, begin that somehow. This is where I come in, like I'm a helper, I work in mental health and addictions, and I'm a valuable resource to the people that I help, not because of anything that I've accumulated in life, but because I've learned to stop accumulating. I've learned to just leave the process of gathering and accumulation. I have stopped. My world was stopped at last. And I'd stopped the world sometimes and just restarted it again. You know what I mean? So in a way you could say that perhaps in previous moments of my life when my world was stopped, at that moment I had the potential to be in action. I had the potential to take action. I had the potential to be healing. Instead, I just relapsed back in and didn't realize it, you know? But 2018, it held. And I have relapses, you know? And by relapses, I don't mean relapses of overt bad behavior. I mean relapses of like negative thinking, you know? Like they talk about fight, flight, or freeze, right? I learned very young that fighting was not an answer. You know, as I was a bully, that was like me being aggressive with the world. I'm going to fight rather than accept who I am and be humble. I'm going to fight, you know. Then I learned fighting is useless, you know. Fighting is useless. So then I would run away. I became an escape artist in my life, right? And I discovered that was no good either, right? So last of all, and the thing that was most damaging was freeze. I'd freeze. I'd just clamp down and have no response whatsoever. And it's taken me a long time to learn to unfreeze, you know? In my own process, freezing meant literally like, it was a physical process. My healing journey includes a very strong component of being present in body pain. I'm going to go into that one in another talk. This has been going on a long time today. But essentially, the things that block us and dislocate us, they start in our emotions. They start in that conditioning process, but they will lead to physical manifestations eventually. It's going to lead to illness. It's going to lead to pain. It's going to lead to injury, you know? And so for me, it was in the end, it was like an accumulation of physical consequences of broken emotional patterns and the result of that terrible conditioning of mind, which trapped me. And I, through the grace of the Spirit, I was given freedom in a most unlikely of ways. And I got nothing but thanks for that. And so as I proceeded in my own healing journey here, this is my attempt to give something. This is my next step here, to share and be present in it and to give something out there in the world. I want to shine this out into the world. And if I just talk about it intellectually, I don't find a lot of resonance in that. I find a lot of like intellectual talk about healing and about spirituality, but very few people are talk from the place of knowing inside, which is being, which is loving, which is being present. What is presence? Presence is when you know you don't know. Anyway, knowing you don't know and being okay is where it begins. And that's pretty much what I have for say today. So I hope that has touched you in some place, and I'll see you next time. Be well.